Okay, so a massive geopolitical firestorm has just blown up, and it connects Jeffrey Epstein to the absolute highest levels of global power. And the source? Well, it's a long-suppressed investigation from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Today, we're going to trace how the release of just one document has started to unravel a web that stretches all the way from New York to the very heart of European diplomacy.
It all kicked off with this bombshell headline on February 11th, 2026. A top-tier European diplomat had their immunity totally revoked. I mean, that's a move you almost never see. And it brought this long-hidden story crashing right out into the open. This was the spark that lit the fuse, and believe me, every single thread ties back to Jeffrey Epstein.
So that brings us to the central mystery we're going to unpack here. The diplomat we're talking about wasn't just some random official. He was the former chairman of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. So the real question is, how on earth did a man linked to the world's most famous humanitarian award get tangled up in a web spun by a convicted sex offender? To figure that out, let's start with the man himself, the person right at the center of this current storm. This first part of the story is all about his incredibly dramatic and sudden fall from grace. The man we're talking about is Thorbjørn Jagland, the former Secretary General of the Council of Europe. He is now facing some heavy-duty charges for aggravated corruption in Norway. The accusation at its core is this. He accepted luxury trips and secret stays from Epstein, and in return, Epstein got an all-access pass to Europe's most elite diplomatic circles. And the fallout? It's been absolutely devastating. After his immunity was stripped, Jagland reportedly attempted suicide and is now in critical condition. So you're probably asking, how did these allegations suddenly come to light after all this time? Well, the answer lies in a secret DEA file, one that was buried for over a decade and pretty much underpins this entire scandal. Get this, the DEA opened an official case targeting Epstein way back in 2010. By 2015, they had an internal memo confirming some really suspicious wire transfers. But then, pretty much nothing. It wasn't until the 2025 Transparency Act that the Department of Justice was forced to release the file, which is what triggered the absolute chaos we're seeing in 2026. Which just begs the question, why on earth was this investigation sat on for 15 years? And the DEA wasn't looking at pocket change here. The investigation was focused on over $50 million. This wasn't some minor financial crime. The agency flagged this incredible amount of money in illegitimate wire transfers, all linked to Epstein's network. It points to a massive coordinated operation. So, case file hashtag 2010 NY1217 was an official DEA investigation. And here's the real kicker. It went way beyond sex trafficking. The DEA was focused on wire transfers connected to narcotics and international prostitution rings, which puts a whole new and much darker spin on Epstein's entire criminal enterprise. But the file reveals something even crazier. Turns out, Epstein was just one of 15 primary targets. The identities of the other 14, who are being called the Shadow 14, are still completely redacted. Word is, they're suspected to be very high-ranking officials in global finance and logistics. This confirms Epstein wasn't some lone wolf. He was part of a much bigger, and still anonymous, network of powerful people. Now, the fallout from this DEA file didn't just stop in Norway. Oh no, the shockwaves quickly jumped across the channel to the United Kingdom, turning what was a national scandal into a full-blown international crisis. Yeah, those exact same documents that were released under the Transparency Act have now kicked off a brand new police inquiry in Britain. This one is focused on misconduct in public office. It really seems like this network had its tentacles deep inside the British establishment too. And the names being looked at are, well, they're big ones. We're talking about Lord Peter Mandelson, a former EU trade commissioner, who's suspected of feeding Epstein's sensitive economic data and inside info on trade policy. And at the same time, new emails suggest Prince Andrew might have shared official UK trade reports with Epstein's crew. This isn't just about gaining access anymore. This is about potentially trading state secrets. Okay, so we've got corruption in Europe, potential espionage in the UK, but what was the end game here? What was it all for? This was never just about money and parties. This was about power, real global power. This brings us to what's being called the intelligence asset theory. The DEA's involvement suggests Epstein was way more than just a sex trafficker. The theory goes that he was actually a facilitator for black market economies, drugs, money laundering, exactly the kind of untraceable networks that are often used or even co-opted by international intelligence agencies for their own off-the-books operations. And the strategy was actually pretty simple, a three-step playbook for eroding institutions from the inside. First, target the gatekeepers, those influential people like Jagland. Second, exchange favors like luxury trips for access and influence. And finally, use that influence to shape global policy on everything from trade deals to who gets to win a Nobel Prize. Epstein's private island and the U.S. Virgin Islands was basically the base of operations for all of this. The source material calls it a sovereign vacuum, a place where high-level protection let them run their criminal activity right out in the open, completely shielded from any kind of oversight. So, with all of this finally public, the biggest question is, where do we go from here? What are the real implications of a criminal network operating at this level for this long? And that brings us right back to the question at the very heart of this scandal, one that investigators are asking themselves. Why was an active DEA investigation into a convicted sex offender and his powerful friends suppressed for nearly a decade? And who had the power to keep it buried? Think about it. The 2025 Transparency Act pried open just one single case file, and it has already implicated some of the most powerful people in the world. It leaves you with a really chilling thought. What other secrets are still sitting in that great archive? And who are the other members of the Shadow 14 still protected, still operating in the dark?